Imagine standing on the edge of a roaring shoreline as thunder rattles the sky, waves tower like living mountains, and an entire world seems to drown under its own weight, because this is exactly the kind of memory echoed across dozens of ancient cultures, from Mesopotamia to India, from China to the Americas, from Australia to the Mediterranean, all telling astonishingly similar stories of a great flood that once swallowed nearly everything. These civilizations were separated by oceans, languages, mountains, and thousands of years. Yet each one preserved a tale that sounds like fragments of the same nightmare: an angry sky, rising waters, a chosen survivor, a vessel, a new beginning. Why? How? Coincidence, or a shared memory of something real? Instructed to build a massive boat sealed with pitch, loaded with animals, family, and supplies, surviving a storm so violent that even the gods trembled, thousands of miles away and centuries later. The Hebrew Bible tells of Noah, another chosen survivor tasked with building an ark, filling it with pairs of animals, enduring relentless rain, releasing birds to find land. The echoes are unmistakable, almost like two civilizations recounting the same disaster in their own tongue. But the flood myth is far from exclusive to the Near East. The Hopi talk about destruction and renewal through rising waters. Polynesian cultures tell of storms and waves sinking ancient islands. One explanation is symbolic, that floods represent rebirth, cleansing, and moral resetting, but this alone cannot explain the specific details repeated worldwide. Another explanation points to real geological disasters, events so massive that ancient people would have perceived them as the end of the world. Around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, the last ice age ended, melting glaciers, raising sea levels more than 120 meters. Swallowing huge areas of land that humans once lived on. Entire coastal regions vanished beneath the waves. The Sunda Shelf, near Southeast Asia, Doggerland, between Britain and Europe, parts of India's coast, and massive sections of Australia's continental shelf all disappeared underwater within the memory of early humans. What if these stories are the cultural scars left by the trauma of watching your world literally drown? 800 years ago, triggering global cooling, massive floods from glacial meltwater, and the collapse of early societies. It's debated, but if true, that scale of chaos could easily seed global legends of a catastrophic deluge. Then there's the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. One theory is human migration. Early humans carried the memory of a real flood, while moving across continents, and over thousands of years, that memory evolved into regional myths. But again, this doesn't fully explain the remarkable parallels. Perhaps ancient people weren't just telling stories, they were trying to preserve history in the only language they had. Myth, and think about this. In Mesopotamia, Utnapishtamas boat rests on Mount Anisia. Noah's Ark touches down on Ararat. Manu's boat ties itself to the Himalayas. Deucalion lands on Mount Parnassus. The Maya survive on mountain peaks. Why mountains? Because when the world floods, the highest point becomes the last refuge, one that would be seared into memory. And the people who retold these stories were not trying to write fantasy. They were explaining the origins of their world as they understood it. Imagine thousands of years of water disasters compressed into one story across generations. Interestingly, many flood stories also describe moral decline, humanity becoming corrupt, the gods responding with destruction. But the deeper pattern may reflect population pressure, resource collapse, or environmental shifts that ancient people encoded as divine punishment. In other words, te gods didn't send the flood, the changing planet did. But the people who couldn't understand climate cycles or sea level rise, only the divine made sense. Maybe the reason so many cultures remember a great flood is that nature itself remembers. And humans, confronted with overwhelming natural forces, did what humans always do. They turned disaster into story, story into myth, and myth into legacy. It's in our movies, our religions, our metaphors. And whether the ancient flood happened once or 100 times in different places, the memory of it was too enormous to forget. So across continents and millennia, through deserts, jungles, mountains, and islands, the same warning survived in different voices. The water once rose higher than anyone believed possible, and it can rise again. And maybe that's why the great flood myth endures, because on some level, we know it's not just a story of the past, but a reminder etched into the bones of civilizations that everything we build, everything we cherish, can be washed away in a single, unforgettable wave.